Welcome to the AFR Saints channel, where we provide you daily content on your favorite team, the New Orleans Saints. Do us a favor and hit that subscribe button. Be sure to leave your comments below and smash that like button. Who dat? We got breaking news here just moments ago. Adam Schefter has tweeted it. The New Orleans Saints have informed their defensive coordinator, Dennis Allen, that they're hiring him as their next head coach. Once again, Allen replaces Sean Payton, minus the interim title. So the Saints have a new head coach. It is DA Dennis Allen, who stepped in for Sean Payton against Tampa Bay when they won that game 9-0 down in Tampa. Sean Payton replaced now by his defensive coordinator, Dennis Allen. Something that so rarely happens. You rarely see promotions from within because so often when coaches are being replaced in the NFL, it's because they were fired. And so their staff goes with them. So you typically bring in a new coach. It's just a very rare situation in the NFL where a coach calls his own shot the way that Sean Payton did, stepping aside. And there's a lot of reasons why this makes sense. So with Mike McDaniel being hired by Miami today, and with Lovie Smith being hired by Houston, and now the Saints hiring Dennis Allen, there are no vacancies currently in the NFL for head coaching jobs, as the Saints was the final remaining vacancy. So Dennis Allen, 49 years old, so still a young coach. We know that Allen went to school at Texas A&M, so he is an Aggie. Played for the Buffalo Bills for one season just on their practice squad, and as a coach began his career at the college ranks at Texas A&M as a GA, spent a couple of years as a defensive backs coach at Tulsa, then jumped into the NFL. The Atlanta Falcons, then to the Saints in 2006 to 2010, jumped to Denver when he got his opportunity to be a defensive coordinator in 2011. A year later was hired to be the head coach of the Raiders, where he was there for 3 seasons. He was fired in 2014, came back to the Saints as a defensive assistant in 2015. Midway through that season, of course, Sean Payton fired Rob Ryan and promoted Dennis Allen to defensive coordinator, and he's been in that role ever since. DA was a member of the Saints coaching staff when they won the Super Bowl in 2009 as the secondaries coach. As a head coach in Oakland with the Raiders, they were not very good. He was 4-12 each of his first 2 seasons, and after an 0-4 start in his 3rd season, he was fired. So just 8-28 as a head coach. That certainly is worth mentioning. It is also fair to mention that Dennis Allen went to one of the worst organizations in the NFL with bad ownership and a bad stadium and bad resources and a bad quarterback situation and all of that therein, and it just flatly didn't go very well. I mean, his quarterbacks were Terrell Pryor and Matt McGloin when he was saying that out loud. Like, how can you help but laugh when you actually say that out loud? He's in a decidedly different situation now in New Orleans. This was the obvious choice. He was the odds-on favorite. I alluded it earlier to with Dennis Allen or Eric Bieniemy. You're choosing between either blondes or brunettes, whichever you prefer. It's which supermodel. Both are great choices. Just pick your preference. And the Saints chose uniformity. They chose the culture that they have worked so hard to build for so long in New Orleans. When Sean Payton was first hired back in 2006, there was a purge. There was a purge of guys that didn't buy in. And it was Wayne Gandy and Dante Stallworth and a lot of guys who were veterans. I mean, look, Stallworth was a first-round draft pick. But they purged those guys to bring in culture guys that were going to buy in. And so you brought in Fujita and Shanley and Semino and Drew Brees and a lot of those guys that they built around. And they got away from that after the Bounty Gate year in 2012, and then you had the back-to-back-to-back 7 and 9 seasons. You saw another purge, and you saw Jimmy Graham and Kenny Stills and a lot of guys who, Junior Gillette, a lot of guys that the Saints had invested a lot in that were good players. And they said, we need to move on to get the locker room back to where it was. And that's been really the charge ever since. And that's why you've seen the Saints draft well and be very selective in free agency with the type of guys that they've brought in. And obviously the Saints valued that the most. And on top of it, Dennis Allen has done a masterful job on the defensive side. When he took over the Saints defense, remember, the Bounty Gate year was the worst defense ever as far as yards allowed. No team had allowed more yards in a season than the 2012 Saints. And Rob Ryan's defenses, he came in 2013. They went to the playoffs, and it was exciting, and he was hanging out at Lucy's and buying beers for everybody, and they were blitzing and getting sacks, and every year that defense progressively got worse. They made the change of Dennis Allen. Every year they've progressively gotten better to where they've been a top 10 defense each of the last 3 seasons. And from that end, you're keeping that alignment in place with Dennis Allen. You're saying, look, we think what happened in Oakland was, man, you were a young guy, first head coaching opportunity in a bad organization with no quarterback play, and it didn't go well. Now you're in an organization that has been one of the pillars of stability in this league over the last 2 decades, which it's funny to say about the Saints, but it's actually true. So you're in a situation where owner, president, GM, head coach all see eye to eye on the vision for this franchise. You're in a situation where you can keep your defensive alignment. Maybe this is the opportunity where Ryan Nielsen is elevated to defensive coordinator. That would make the most sense. So you have your defensive staff still in place. If Chris Richard stays in the secondary, you keep your defensive staff in place. You could very well keep Pete Carmichael Jr. as OC. Remember, there were times throughout Sean Payton's era in New Orleans where he and Pete Carmichael flip-flopped play calling duties. So, when Sean Payton was out of the league in 2012, Pete Carmichael called plays that year, and still one of the top offenses in the NFL. So, I think there's tremendous value there. The biggest, most obvious question now becomes, who is going to be your quarterback? You've answered the head coach question. Now, are you committed to Jameis Winston? If so, for how long? We've talked so much, and I know there's so much chatter about the Saints' salary cap situation and all of the cap hell stuff that we hear all the time. And if you've listened to this show for long enough, you've heard me say it long enough, there is no such thing as cap hell. As long as you have an owner who's willing to pay cash up front as by way of a bonus, you can restructure a deal however you want. And the Bensons, Mr. Benson and now Gail Benson, have been willing to do that, to work with Mickey Loomis and with Kai Harley to make all of this work. So yes, the Saints are $76 million over the cap. They've got a lot of work to do to get within cap compliance by the start of the league year. So you're going to start to see these deals restructured. You're going to see them. There are going to be cap casualties. That's going to happen. But the challenge is not nearly as big this year as it was a year ago. And you're not looking at a situation where you're going to be paying a quarterback $20, $30 million per year or against the cap. So you're going to see some of these deals redone. There's obviously money that there's room for them to work, to rework some of these contracts, and they'll get to that. But what are you going to pay Jameis Winston? Like we talk about Taysom Hill, and people make a big deal of that all the time. You could certainly restructure Taysom if you wanted to do that, but his base is $1.1 million. He's got a $9 million roster bonus. I mean, we could look at all this, but they'll figure that out. But the big talking point about Taysom all the time is how they gave him this giant contract. It really isn't that. As we've gone through, it's a 4-year, $40 million deal. And the cap hit next year is 12.3. The dead cap number is 19. So he's going to cost you $12 million next year. And you can get out of it after 2022 if you want. So you can commit a 5-year contract to a quarterback like Jameis that's backloaded, and it helps you with the cap. The Saints don't need my help explaining this. They know what they're doing. My point is, the decision they have to make is, are you committing to Jameis? And if you're not committing to Jameis, who's your guy? Hiring Dennis Allen very likely takes you out of the running, if you were ever in it, for Aaron Rodgers, for Russell Wilson, for Deshaun Watson. Those options are likely off the table. The allure of New Orleans was not only the stability, but Sean Payton, being a quarterback under Sean Payton. Well, that's gone now. And you didn't replace Sean Payton with a a respected offensive coach. So those opportunities are gone. So you now kind of come down to, are you committing to Jameis, or are you going into the draft committed to drafting your future? And that's an answer they're going to have to make in short order here, with Combine coming, and then after that, free agency, and then the draft with all the pro days surrounding it. But what we do know now, if you're just joining us, is that Dennis Allen, just minutes ago it came down from Schefter, has been informed by the Saints that he will be the next head coach of the New Orleans Saints, elevated from defensive coordinator. So Saints got their guy, fill out the rest of the staff. Now you start making some of these free agent decisions as you build the roster for 2022 and beyond. Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.